is an Oscar-winning director and producer whose work focuses on propaganda, power, and the role the media plays in shaping public understanding. His recent film, Mr. Nobody Against Putin. Yes. Yes. Three yeses.
I watched it. I'll ask you, it was really good. Oh, thank you. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. Brought international attention to how quickly institutions can be transformed when media and information are brought under tighter control. David, the floor is yours for a short introduction.
All right, thank you. First, I'd like to thank you, Senator Booker, and the committee for inviting me to speak today. I'm here as a member of the documentary filmmaking community, which is in a real moment of crisis. Some of the most important and significant work being made today has fewer and fewer places to exist. And it's not because audiences don't want it, but because the system that decides what gets made and seen is consolidating into the hands of a few players with a narrow and limited view of what audiences should watch. Recently, I had the chance to speak on stage at the Academy Awards in Los Angeles after winning the Oscar for my film, Mr. Nobody Against Putin. I chose to use some of that time to speak against the proposed merger of Paramount and WBD, because I believe this could make the situation for filmmakers like me much, much worse. Why do I think this? As a documentary filmmaker, I've spent much of the last 15 years making films about authoritarian countries, most recently Russia. I've made films about propaganda and mass media, and I've seen how this works as a process. The early stages look similar, regardless of the country. Control over the flow of information consolidates. Storytellers of all types have fewer places to go to tell their stories. What's striking is that free expression isn't lost through overt censorship. You don't need to tell anyone what to say. The pipeline does the work quietly on its own, because fewer decision makers control what gets financed and what reaches audiences. This is also important because democracy depends on the stories we tell. Today, more than ever. The world is far more complex than it was in Jefferson's time. Back then, people were voting on issues they could see with their own eyes. Today, voters are asked to make decisions about microchips, global supply chains, AI, and wars happening thousands of miles away. Most people don't experience any of that firsthand. We understand it through the stories we're told. Walter Lippmann, one of the most influential American journalists and political thinkers of the 20th century, grappled with the challenge of informing citizens in an increasingly complex world. 100 years ago, he came to a bleak conclusion. The world is simply too complicated for the average person to keep up. His answer for lawmakers like yourselves was to lean towards technocratic governance, with experts figuring things out behind the scenes while the rest of us are fed a simplified version of reality we can live with. In other words, experts make decisions and we get memes. But that's not the route we the people chose. Instead, we tried something more ambitious, building media systems that could actually serve the public. Public broadcasting, editorial standards, and ownership limits. The idea was not to give up on people, but to give them a fighting chance to understand the world they're voting in. And that only works if those systems stay independent, genuinely diverse, and not concentrated in the hands of a few people who tend to see the world the same way. What's in front of us now isn't abstract. The Paramount-WBD merger is a $110 billion deal that would fuse two of the largest media companies in the world into a single gatekeeper, controlling film studios, streaming platforms, and major news networks under one corporate structure. I've recently joined more than 2,000 filmmakers, actors, and writers in citing a letter opposing this merger because we've seen where this road leads. But it also feels kind of different this time. In most countries I've worked in, China, Russia, and so on, leaders are at least pretending that there is a distance from media consolidation. What's unusual about this moment in the United States is the openness. Government leaders are being explicit about what they want the media to look like, and we're seeing regulatory decisions that allow further concentration to move forward. The administration is openly embracing the possibilities of such great media power resting in so few hands. Just think about those terrible possibilities from the perspective of my own industry. The The CNN archive holds more than 4 million assets, over 45 years of global broadcast history covering wars, elections, disasters, and political upheaval. The CBS archive adds decades of CBS news coverage and classic programming. Together, these collections represent a huge portion of the American historical record, and they would fall under a single ownership structure with demonstrated willingness to shape editorial content in alignment with White House preferences. These aren't passive libraries, they're controlled systems. Access requires disclosure, legal review, approval. Pricing can be set without any real competition. An archival filmmaker has described being denied previously available footage because it, in the right holder's judgment, showed American soldiers in a bad light while our country was at war. That is a gatekeeping power over the historical record. An emerged entity with strong political incentives to control the narrative, that power becomes something far more dangerous. Independent filmmakers working on documentaries about democracy, civil rights, immigration, or foreign policy now face extreme challenges reaching American audiences, a situation made much worse by the recent closing of the Center for Public Broadcasting. Films that win the Academy Award for Best Documentary, including my own, could not find a US streaming home. In some cases, perhaps this is because major platforms fear the political consequences of carrying them. A filmmaker whose documentary followed Amazon workers' historic union campaign could not find a distributor because of those distributors' commercial relationships with Amazon Studios. This is the documented, present-day reality of storytelling in a consolidated media market. The range of buyers has become so limited that American documentary filmmakers are flooding to Europe to try to get their films made there. The CPH Docs Film Financing Forum in Denmark, one of Europe's most important annual events for documentary filmmaking, is seeing such an influx of applications from American projects that they don't know what to do with them. We should not accept a situation where so many America's leading and most idealistic storytellers are desperately trying to work outside the country. As documentary filmmakers, we are part of a tradition a century old, built on the idea that storytelling can empower people, strengthen democracy, and unite rather than divide. That only works when there's real space for independent voices. And one last thing. Working in places where a small number of actors control the flow of information taught me something simple. It doesn't just erode democracy. It erodes creativity too. The same forces that flatten political discourse flatten culture. It's not just a dystopia. It's a boring dystopia. I'll close by reiterating the acceptance speech from the Oscars on why it was so important to stop the merger. Mr. Nobody Against Putin is about how you lose your country. You lose it through countless small little acts of complicity. When we act complicit when a government murders people on the streets of our major cities, when we don't say anything, when oligarchs take over the media and control how we can produce it and consume it. We don't have to accept that. We have to stop the merger. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak, and look forward to answering questions later.
That's extraordinary testimony. I'm looking forward to getting to our next witness.